Good morning, guys. We got a brand new Thermal Orange NSX here in front of me, and we're going to be doing a lot of work on this car. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install our new carbon fiber steering wheel with the extended carbon paddles in the car. So we'll go through a step-by-step tutorial to show you guys how it's done. If you guys are not local, this is something you can do easily at home by yourself. So this is a factory wheel that's in the car right now, and we're going to be swapping this with a carbon wheel. So step one, first thing we want to do is disconnect the battery to get started. And to do that, you want to open the hood. So let's get the hood open and I'll show you what to do. All right, with the hood open, we're going to go to the battery compartment. So to do that, you lift this thing, get this cover open up. You need a 10mm wrench, which is what we have here. Turn it to the output position. We're going to disconnect the negative terminal of the battery. The main purpose of doing this is so when you change the airbag, it doesn't trip any engine lights. So we're going to wiggle this thing, get it loose. So disconnect the 10mm and set it aside. It's helpful to have a rag here. So after you disconnect the 10mm, cover up the negative terminal. So make sure this thing doesn't make contact with the battery. And once that's done, you're all set to go. We're going to go back in the compartment and start removing the steering wheel. So before we get started on the inside of the car, I just want to show you the new carbon wheel we built for this particular customer. He opted for the orange stripe, the silver stitching, and he's also got the carbon faceplate to match, as well as the extended carbon paddles. Everything is finished in a gloss finish, so you got the gloss paddles, gloss steering wheel, gloss faceplate. We're going to swap this wheel onto the car with all the existing parts so everything can stay on there. However, we do need the black plastic cover from the back, and that's what we're going to remove from the stock wheel once we get it off the car. I'll show you a couple tricks on how to remove the wheel quickly. All right, so we're inside the car back again now that we got the battery disconnected. A couple things I wanted to point out. So if you purchased the steering wheel, obviously we need to swap the steering wheel, and the steering wheel needs to come off. However, if you've got the paddles you purchased from us, just the extended paddles or the carbon faceplate separately, you still need to remove the wheel. And the reason being, there's hidden screws that hold this whole thing together. So without taking the steering wheel off, you can't access those screws, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So the first step here is we're gonna need to get a T30 wrench. What we're going to do is we're going to remove the two TORX bits you can see hiding here on the side. They're readily exposed, so there's one on this side and there's one on the other side. So we're going to remove these two T30 bits, and that'll allow the airbag to come out. So carefully remove those, and then I'll show you how to unplug the airbag. All right, so we're looking at the right TORX bit. Again, this is a T30 bit. So let's see if I can show you this way. You can see better. So we're going to go in here with a T30. Okay. And carefully remove this with the ratchet. So these are the only two screws holding the airbag. So once you remove these two, there's the other one. Okay, so again, there's a little bit of thread lock on it. With the two T30 bits removed on the side of the airbag we showed you earlier, you're going to be able to lift the airbag up like this, and you can look, there's two plugs. This plug is a grounding plug right here, the brown wire right here, and the other one is the yellow plug. So we're going to unplug these two, and then we can separate the airbag from the unit itself. So we're going to pull on this part right here. That'll allow the plug to come out, right? So that'll take the airbag out. And the other one, we're just going to depress on the bottom right here, and then we'll be able to pull this thing out. Let me see if I can show you. So that plug right there. All right, so we're going to unplug that, and then we'll take the airbag out. All right, with the airbag separated, we have these two loose cables just tucked away on the side here. We're going to need to use a hex bit. This is the H10 bit, as you can see. So the H10 bit is going to go in here. We're going to remove this center nut. Once this is removed, the wheel will separate, and then we can get the wheel off the car. So let's get this center bolt off. This bolt's pretty tight, so make sure you have a nice wrench to remove it with, and then we can get started. Here's what the bolt looks like removed from the vehicle. So set this aside. We're going to need this when we put the steering wheel back on, but for now, just set it aside. The last step when you're doing this is you want to detach one clip and it's this white clip in the back here. So I'm gonna take a little thin flathead. You see right here, there's a little clip right here. So we're gonna press down right here at the bottom of the clip. And when we press down, that'll release it. And then we can pop the clip out. So when we pull it out, you see how it separates from the wheel like that? So when that's separated, now the wheel is totally detached from the vehicle and we can remove it out of the car. See how it's all loose? So it's gonna slide it out. This black plug, just make sure it doesn't come out with the vehicle. So this black plug right here, we're gonna keep it inside the car. So this thing stays with the car. So this plug right here. So we're just gonna slide the wheel out, just kind of wiggle it, and the wheel will come separate. And then we will take it out. That'll separate the wheel. And then we will work on the bench for the rest. Okay, so we got the two wheels side by side here on the workbench. You don't need any special tools at this point. You're just gonna be transferring parts from one wheel to the other. In this case, here's the factory wheel on the right. We're gonna be pulling this whole thing apart and taking out the switch panels. And then we're gonna be installing the switch panels over here in the carbon faceplate. And then we will transfer the wiring harness, which is this inner piece right here. We're gonna move that over to the new wheel. Then we already have the paddles, everything on this particular wheel. So in this case, we just plug it in. But if you were purchasing, let's say, a steering wheel and not the paddles, then you would remove your stock paddles and transfer it from this wheel over to this one. So I'll show you how to get this thing done. All right, first step, wheels in front of us. We're gonna remove the Phillips screws in the four corners. So these are the black screws. So we're gonna take all four of those out. And then once we remove these, that'll allow the faceplate to separate. All right, with all the screws removed, the next step is to remove the back plate. This back plate is crucial, but the only way to get this back plate off is, of course, you have to remove the wheel from the car, which is why I mentioned earlier you must remove the wheel from the vehicle. This plate is held by those four screws we removed, and then it's pressure fit with two plastic clips hidden beneath here. So we're gonna just kind of slide this thing out, and you can kind of see how this thing just kind of wiggles itself loose, right? And then we're just gonna remove the back section by pulling it off. So with the back plate removed, you can see these two little plastic things on the side are kind of pressure fit. So they're pressure fit into these little rubber holes right here. So with those four screws removed, you just wiggle it and it pops right off. We're gonna set this aside. You're gonna need this plate for the new wheel. Set that aside. Now this is the part that I was mentioning earlier. You cannot get this faceplate off without removing these two screws. And you can't access these two screws unless you take the back plate off. That's why the wheel has to separate from the car. Otherwise, you really can't access these two screws, and you're gonna end up breaking the faceplate if you try to pull it off. So with these screws exposed, we're gonna remove these two screws really quick. And this will allow the faceplate to be freed and removed from the front. So pressure clips, two Phillips screws. So we're gonna flip the wheel back. Oh, before we flip the wheel around, one more screw to remove. We want to remove the ground screw right here, the Phillips screw. So remove that one. So now all the wires are free on the back side. You can see the paddles are exposed now, but the paddles are removed with two Phillips screws on the front side of the wheel. So we flip it back around. So now you see the faceplate is pretty much free. Now that you remove the two hidden screws in the back, we can separate the faceplate and then we'll be able to pop it off. Okay, the faceplate we kind of separated from the wheel. You have to unplug the two plugs. So there's one blue plug on this side and there's a white plug on the other side. So depress the tabs and then you're gonna pull these plugs out. There's a white plug and then you're gonna pull the blue plug out. With these plugs separated, the faceplate can separate from the wheel now. So now we got the faceplate off. So we're gonna set this aside depending on if you're gonna reuse a faceplate or if you purchased a new faceplate in a different finish, or if yours is plastic, you're going to carbon. We're gonna need the faceplate, but we're gonna remove the switches. So by doing so, we flip it upside down and you see there's a bunch of screws back here. So we're gonna remove a couple of the things. We're gonna remove these silver screws here because we're gonna need these two brackets. And then we're gonna remove the 3 screws on each side, 1, 2, and 3 on each side of the switch panels. And there's 1, 2, and 3 on this side. And we're gonna swap the switch panels over to the new wheel. All right, so now that we got the faceplate ready to go, we got to get the steering wheel done. So in this particular case, the customer bought the extended carbon paddles with the carbon steering wheel. So you see it's already installed on this side. So we don't need to take the paddles off. That would be these 2 Phillips screws on each side. There's 2 on each one to hold the paddles, but we don't need to remove them. What we do need to do is remove this plastic switch harness in the middle. So to do that, you have to unplug the paddles from each of the plugs. So there's one that goes here, one that's on this side, which we unplugged. So we unplug these. Once that separates, the paddles stay, then we're gonna remove this harness. So just kind of wiggle this thing, and this thing will pop out. And then when this pops out, we're gonna transfer this to the new wheel. Let's see if I can get this out with one hand. There we go. So when this pops out, we're gonna separate it. This comes with the white and blue plugs, which we're gonna transfer over. So that's the harness. So this harness, we need to transfer it to the new wheel because you can see the wheel doesn't have it over there. And then the 2 green plugs on the left and right correspond to the left and right green plugs, which we're gonna plug back in for the new paddles. And then this wheel can be put back together. So at this point, this wheel is stripped pretty much down to nothing besides the paddles and the wheel. So if you're doing the core exchange, you will be returning this wheel back to us with the paddles. So we're gonna set this thing aside for right now. Put this over here. We got the faceplate ready to go. And now we're just gonna put the harness back on the wheel, plug in the paddles, and then we can start reassembly. So here's a quick view of everything plugged back in. We have the paddles, screws attached to paddles, the green harness coming out, plugged back into the harness itself on both sides for the left and right paddles. These plugs are gonna be going to the faceplate, the blue and the white. So with the faceplate back on, these 2 plugged in, pretty much the wheel is put back together and ready to go in the car. So grab the faceplate. The faceplate goes on like this. We're gonna plug in the 2 plugs, snap this piece back in, and when this is snapped in, we're gonna snap the rear cover back on, and the wheel's ready to go. So with the back plate removed, you can see these 2 little plastic things on the side are kind of pressure fit. So they're pressure fit into these little rubber holes right here. So with those 4 screws removed, you just wiggle it and it pops right off. We're gonna set this aside. You're gonna need this plate for the new wheel. Set that aside. Now this is the part that I was mentioning earlier. You cannot get this faceplate off without removing these 2 screws. And you can't access these 2 screws unless you take the back plate off. That's why the wheel has to separate from the car. Otherwise, you really can't access these 2 screws, and you're gonna end up breaking the faceplate if you try to pull it off. So with these screws exposed, we're gonna remove these 2 screws really quick. And this will allow the faceplate to be freed and removed from the front. So pressure clips, 2 Phillips screws. So we're gonna flip the wheel back. Oh, before we flip the wheel around, one more screw to remove. We wanna remove the ground screw right here, the Phillips screw. So remove that one. So now all the wires are free on the back side. You can see the paddles are exposed now, but the paddles are removed with 2 Phillips screws on the front side of the wheel. So we flip it back around. So now you see the faceplate is pretty much free. Now that you remove the 2 hidden screws in the back, we can separate the faceplate and then we'll be able to pop it off. All right, so we're back inside the car. The steering wheel is gonna be realigned and just installed back on the car. We pulled the airbag wire through. If you remember that white plug that we removed, we're gonna line it up with the plug right here, and we're gonna push down to hear click. That locks that in. This cable right here and this loose cable right here for the airbag. So here we just wanna make sure the wheel's centered on, lined up straight. And then we're gonna put the H10 hex nut back on. And once that nut is back on the wheel, then we're going to torque it and we'll be ready to go. All right, so we put the airbag back on, tighten all the bolts. The steering wheel is installed with the extended paddles. Pretty much everything's all set now. You guys followed along as we installed the wheel. So now we can go ahead and start on the rest of the vehicle. We're going to be doing carbon interior trims, carbon nose beak, bunch of things for this car. So that'll be the next step. But The steering wheel is done. Thanks for following along. Hope this video helped. If you guys have any questions, shoot us a message or email us. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.